US and global markets have regained some of their dramatic losses in early trading today in response to Donald Trump's tariffs, boosted in part by the prospects of a trade agreement between the United States and South Korea. Meanwhile, the European Commission will present its planned response to the US President's blanket tariffs on European goods early next week.
On Wall Street, the main indexes opened sharply higher after a sell-off that's wiped out trillions of dollars. Investors were looking for any sign that the Trump administration might start negotiating down some of the more aggressive tariffs. President Trump took to social media to hail a phone call with his South Korean counterpart, which he boasted would lead to a great deal for both countries. By contrast, Beijing issued a sharp rebuke after Mr. Trump threatened to push tariffs on Chinese goods to over 100%.
Pressure, threats and blackmail are not the way to deal with China. China will take necessary measures to firmly safeguard its legitimate rights and interests. If the US ignores the interests of the two countries and the international community and insists on a tariff war and a trade war, China will fight it to the end.
The EU is poised to hit the US with €22 billion worth of tariffs in response to President Trump's duties on steel and aluminium, everything from poultry to soybeans to makeup. But not bourbon, thanks to lobbying from Ireland and others. The Commission today was adamant that any US moves to dismantle the EU's VAT or food safety systems were a non-starter.
We're very clear about what non-tariff barriers are and what they are not. And we will be making those points plain as day in our negotiations with the US.
In Washington, following a meeting with his US counterpart Brooke Rowlands, the Minister for Agriculture acknowledged the demands the Trump administration is making on greater access to European markets.
There is access for American beef into Europe, but the tariff rate is something that would be a concern for them. But we work through those issues, and we also work through and highlight the fact that Irish companies are based here. 770 Irish companies employing 200,000 American people.
The US blanket tariffs are due to hit Europe tomorrow, and the EU will formally adopt the retaliatory measures on steel and aluminium. While the markets drew breath today, there's little sign that things are de-escalating. Tony Connolly, RTE News, Brussels.
Well, let's speak to our Washington correspondent, Sean Whelan. Now, Sean, there seems to be mixed messages coming from the Trump administration on whether negotiation is possible on tariffs. What's your reading of it?
Well, it is mixed messages, Sharon. We saw this morning the Jameson Greer, the US trade representative, the guy who actually does the negotiating on tariffs and market access with other countries, saying we are putting these into effect tonight. They're going to apply to everybody and no negotiations. But then saying later on, well, yeah, we can negotiate deals with people and that'll be up to the president to decide whether he removes the tariffs or not. We saw the same mixed messaging from Donald Trump himself yesterday when he was asked precisely about this. Is this a negotiation or a tax rise? He said it can be both. We can put on the taxes, the tariffs onto goods coming in from other countries, but if they negotiate a deal with us, we can cut a deal with them as well, but not for some countries, suggesting that China might be difficult. The EU is going to try and negotiate. It has been putting measures to the Americans really since last November, including buying energy, again something President Trump mentioned yesterday, but the Americans seeking market access. Jameson Greer saying it's not about the tariffs themselves, it's about access to other people's markets. And the same from Brooke Rowlands a short time ago to the Minister for Agriculture, Martin Hayden. They want more access to European markets. Now, I'm sure a deal can be negotiated on market access issues, but as you heard in Tony's report, there are some things that are simply non-negotiable, like VAT and like health issues, like hormones in beef. The beef from America can be imported into Europe if it's raised without artificial hormones. So those are the kind of difficult areas. But one thing that Jameson Greer said today in his testimony, the trade rep, it took a long time for these issues to build up, and he thinks it'll take a long time for them to build out. Markets are betting that the negotiations will happen sooner rather than later, but markets change as we see. Sharon?
Washington correspondent Sean Whelan, thank you for that.